the main fight, Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker. Adesanya coming in at a negative 280. Whittaker coming in as a plus 230 underdog. Fern, give me your thoughts on this fight.
Having watched the first fight, it was very exciting to watch. Robert Whittaker had beat some people that, I didn't think he was going to beat. Israel Adesanya had beat people like my idol, Anderson Silva. And putting them together, it was like, okay, can these guys do what they've been doing to other people to each other? And watching it, it's very apparent that they both had a certain game plan, because I feel Israel was able to implement his, and Whittaker stuck to kind of the same plan the whole time, like where then Israel was able to figure him out. And what was your quick take on the first fight before we get into more like additional breakdown?
Yeah, so on the, I think pretty much what you said. It seemed like Whittaker was not able to adapt. I feel like he should have been able to see that what he was trying to do was not working, but he wasn't able to change it up. So I don't know what that, it's obviously very difficult when you're in the octagon, in the moment, to do a lot of thinking and analysis. But I think he's had a lot of time now to analyze what happened in that first fight, and I think he can do a lot of different things that he did not do in the first fight. So, if they had implemented, either one on different strategies, I think the fight could have, Israel maybe still would have won, but I think the fight would have played out possibly very, very differently. And so that's what I'm looking forward to this second fight. I feel like Whittaker has, obviously, since he lost the first fight, he has the most things to change. But I also think that he has a great team, great coaches, and I do think that we'll see. I don't think it's going to play out exactly the same way. He may not win the second fight just like he didn't win the first fight, but I don't think this second fight is going to go very much like the first fight did.
Very close when they would get in with each other and exchange. It was in the disengaging that, Israel was able to use his kickboxing expertise, his reach, all that stuff, his movement that he just, has obviously perfected facing these top level, opponents throughout the years. Whittaker, being the shorter fighter, he had more ground to cover, was able to use his power. At one point he was starting to utilize kicks. Israel was able to keep his distance consistently, use his hands, and he switches stands like immediately in all his fights to just kind of make them think, second guess, leaning back, circling out, ducking. He's a tall guy, and in the fight against Whittaker, he ducked under a couple of his strikes, and you're like, that's like, I don't know, he's a tall guy, so him to bring himself down to waist level was entertaining to watch, because you're like, he's doing everything to avoid these strikes, and he's really switching it up. I'm hoping that Whittaker is able to adjust and realize, I have to aim for everywhere with this guy. Up, down, left, right, in, out, any way that he can move, he's going to move. Because in the finishing sequence, you see Whittaker lands a huge left. It pushes Adesanya back, then he lands a huge left. And it's just that movement that I think is going to be interesting to prepare for, to adjust for. Whittaker, I think if he lands a couple of those big punches, can do some damage. It's just, is he going to get hit repeatedly while trying to do so? Switching it up with kicks, all these things are going to play a big factor.
Yeah, and I think, so we've seen what it does take to beat Izzy when not too long ago with Jan's fight, where what I thought was really impressive in the fight with Jan is Jan was so alert and kind of on his toes in his striking game that I feel like Izzy had to actually put effort into focusing on looking out for that Polish power, for those big power punches, and that's what really opened up the wrestling for Jan. I feel like that's going to be Whittaker's kind of key to victory, where his striking game has to be good enough that it makes Izzy worry about it enough that he's going to be able to take some wrestling shots to try to even if he doesn't take Izzy to the ground, because it's very hard, obviously, to take Izzy to the ground, and even if you do, hard to keep him there. But put enough of that wrestling pressure on that Izzy now has to worry about the wrestling. And I feel like if he's worried about the wrestling, that's what could open up the strikes, like you were talking about, where Whittaker did land some big strikes against Izzy in that first fight. I feel like that wrestling game is what's going to, open Izzy up to that. Because when you're trying to defend wrestling shots with, by sprawling, that's where your feet are going back and your face is going forward, which is the exact opposite of usually what Izzy does when he's avoiding strikes, where his legs are forward and his head is back and he's leaning back and things like that. So to get Izzy's body to move in a different way, that's going to make him available to get hit, it's probably going to be the wrestling game. But I feel like that wrestling game is not going to work at all unless he is very sharp on his toes with his striking game. So this one's going to be really interesting. I really hope that Whittaker is bringing something new into this fight, and that we could see something new, not just a repeat of fight number 1.
Yeah, and vice versa. With Whittaker bringing something, I hope Izzy doesn't take him lightly. There's, I compare Israel's style a lot to Anderson Silva without a lot of the flaws that Anderson had at the end of his career. I still remember that loss against Chris Weidman where Anderson was toying with him, and everyone's like, what is Chris Weidman doing in here with Anderson Silva? And as he's doing his whatever, Weidman reaches in and clips him and rewrote history. Anderson, I don't think, was ever the same. Weidman was able to ascend. And Whittaker can do that if Israel isn't careful, because he did land those, and Izzy likes to be fancy, likes to show off, put on a show, which is great. But you got to deliver. And I just would hate to see him lose like that, but it would also be great to see Whittaker win like that, after all that trash talking and the ego and everything.
And Izzy has that same style of striking defense that Silva used so often, which is not blocking with your hands, but bending back and using his height to get out of the way. If he's clowning around or trying to show off we've seen what can happen. So my guess is, though, Izzy is going to take Robert Whittaker serious, unless it's very clear, in the first minute or two that Whittaker is not bringing his A game. Kind of like Paulo Costa. When he fought Costa, it seemed very clear, very quick that Costa was not going to bring anything that was threatening Izzy, which is, the time when Izzy really opened up and was clowning on Costa. But even then, there's always the risk. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and Izzy can take Whittaker's power. Can Whittaker take another Izzy punch like he did last fight? And you're hoping he can get over that, finish, that power. Because he was hurt. At the end of round 1, he was hurt. He was dropped. And then in round 2, it was pretty quick finish again. So I want to see him be able to walk through and persevere. Because everyone says, what's that saying? Everyone's got a plan till they get hit. And Whittaker can want to bring everything, but Izzy really hit him hard last time. So I want to see him adapt and adjust and walk through it and put on the show and not just be in shock. Because you mentioned the Paulo fight. He was in shock. As soon as he got hit, you just could tell he's like, I'm in a fight, and this guy's beating me up.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as picks go, my guess is Izzy's probably going to win, but if I'm betting money, I'm betting money actually on Whittaker. I think it's a good bet for the odd that you're getting. I do think that Whittaker is going to bring something different. I don't think he's getting credit for it with the odds makers. So this is one where I'm going to pick the underdog Whittaker.
I'm going to stick with Izzy. I want to see him keep winning and see, hopefully, rematch for the 205 with a better game plan at that point. We'll see.
Okay, we'll see. Looking forward to it.